Welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. Today I want to talk about Joel Webbon. He's a kind of I don't know that it's televangelist is the right word, but he's like I don't know, like a right-wing extremist pastor. Now, I understand if people don't really like me getting into politics as much, want to hear more about religion, and that's actually the reason I started YouTube in the first place, because it's a whole group of people that were talking about politics rather than religion. But let me explain. Politics and religion in the past 8 years have become so inextricably linked that it's nearly impossible to break them free of each other. Let me just give a couple of examples with Joel Webbon specifically, okay? If you watch my channel regularly at all, you'll probably recognize a couple of the videos that I want to show. Let me find one. Hang on. Let's see. Wait. Where is it? It's
laws are God.
Yeah, here we go. Okay. This is one of the Project 2025 training videos in the background there. I'm not going to cover those tonight, but if you want to see them, I'll be talking about them on my Owen Morgan Unfiltered YouTube channel, Wednesday and Thursday mornings, 10:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. If you missed the stream, I upload them to that channel, edited, cleaned up later on. So anyway, listen to Joel Webbon's breakdown here. By the way, while we listen to this stuff, we're going to play some Breath of the Wild in the background. Shouldn't bother you too much. You never played before. Just give this a listen.
God appoints some kind of ruler who is unapologetically Christian, and he comes in with a sword and says, I'm sorry, but lawlessness and wickedness will not be tolerated anymore. And he doesn't force conversions, just for the record, because that's another one of the objections that's just ill-founded. He doesn't go around forcing conversions, but instead what he does is he forces external morality. He doesn't force a change of heart. Only the gospel can do that.
So what he's saying here...
But what a king can do is he can say, whether you're regenerate or not, you're going to pretend.
So what he's saying is, you're worried about us forcing you to be a Christian, but I'm not going to force you to be a Christian. I can't make you believe the Bible. I'm just going to force you to pretend to be a Christian. That was my objection all along. Are you serious? So the politics and religion have become so linked together now because Christian nationalists are desperate to take control of the government. Christian nationalists like Joel Webbon. Dude is not small, by the way. He's extremely influential. His policies will never get through. He's way too extreme for that. And the government usually kind of meets in the middle for the most part a little bit. He's completely off base with everything. So I don't really worry about him, passing policies or anything like that. But the fact that he's out there is just wild to me. So I want to just listen to a couple of things that he's said recently. There's a video from him. Let's see. Yeah, there's a video from him justifying slavery in the Bible. Seriously. And it crosses over into politics of today really smoothly. So I don't know. I feel like it's really hard for me to stay away from it completely. But every video that I upload to this YouTube channel right here will have some kind of religious or propaganda something connected to it. My my Fireside channel, Owen Morgan Fireside Chat, that has more political stuff on it. But hang on, there's one more thing I want to watch from him. Oh, yeah. Hold on, let's see. Yeah, here we go. This is... I talked about this, as a matter of fact, not too long ago on my Fireside channel. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but just want to give you an idea of some of the things he's saying right now.
The reason why I have grown to despise democracy is because it's not we the people. It's we the some. some people. And who are those people? Non-elected officials.
So he's complaining about the fact that he doesn't have representation and using that as a basis to advocate for dictatorship. He wants a dictator. I don't want to go through like my whole past history with him, but he has explicitly said, I want a dictator to take control of the country.
Like what democracy, what it gives, lends its strength to is instead of having elected officials that have power, is a raw universal, because that's what we have is a universal democracy. Everyone is allowed to vote.
Oh, universal as in there are no limits on who can vote. Okay, I was confused by that. Like a democratic republic? Like what other kinds of democracy? I've never heard of that one. Okay, he just wants to restrict people's voting rights. Yeah. This was suggested back in the 1800s too, about the black community, about slaves. Yeah, they shouldn't be allowed to vote. Jesus Christ, man. Do you see what's wrong with you? Sadly, I don't think he does. Anyway, in this specific video, he's talking about restricting women's right to vote. He doesn't believe women should be allowed to vote.
Everyone. And just for the record, yeah, I think the 19th Amendment should be repealed. I think
that's not restricting voting rights based on sex.
That because, well, first and foremost, because I'm a Christian, and that is the Christian position. Oh my gosh, you're saying that? Yes, that is the Christian position.
I don't think that's a Christian position, but okay, whatever.
Is that households should not be divided against one another. So it's not just elevating a male vote.
Wow, he's stretching that.
But it's elevating the household vote. We're saying that that society, if you break it down to the basic building block, is not atomistic as individuals, but molecular, being households.
Anyway, if you want to watch the whole context of this video, again, I talk about it on like my weekly podcast, which I upload in pieces on my Fireside Chat channel. But today I want to talk about, hold on, this video where he tries to justify slavery. It's absolutely insane. Talking to a dude named John Harris. Never heard of him before. Have no idea where he came from. I couldn't find much of a trace of him elsewhere, but he appears on this guy's like podcast and channel and stuff to talk about things from time to time. So I listened to a little bit of it, and it really starts ramping up around 8 minutes, so that's where we're going to start. Let's give this a listen. By the way, Owen, have you watched the Angel Hair Section Ties by the East Patch? I don't think so. Angel Hair, the East Patch. I've never... Are you talking about, like, for... is that for Breath of the Wild? I'm not sure. Anyway, let's listen.
I'm used to it at this point, just because it's one of, I'd say, the many things that people don't care for, especially if they're left-leaning, that I say. But this tends to be the one I think that because
I'm sorry, let me step back a little. I'm not sure what he said.
Race relations, the way the slaves were freed, and the consequences of many of them dying and living in a war-torn region and being dependent on the government and all these things. We get labeled, and it's unfortunate. I'm used to it at this point, just because it's one of, I'd say, the many things that people don't care for, especially if they're left-leaning, that I say. But
okay, for some reason, my computer is going really slow. I don't know what that's all about. Hold on, let me just close this and try to reopen it. Maybe it was the page.
Way the slaves were freed, and the government.
Well, maybe it's the video. Hold on.
All of their coffee is hand-selected.
Yeah, it's the video, I guess. Yep, okay, never mind. Sorry, disregard. So he's unhappy with the fact that people are calling him racist, is what I'm picking up here. The left uses the word racist as like a method of attacking people, but he is racist. Like really, really racist, as you'll find out.
I've written more on it, and there's some optical things. Like there's a picture of me that was on my Facebook where I'm, I think, 13 years old, and I was dressing up at the Battle of Newmarket in a VMI uniform that was with a Confederate flag in the background, because that's what the...
Wait, a VMI? I'm not familiar with what he just said. Let me see. Was that from the Civil War?
A VMI uniform that was with a Confederate flag in the background, because that's what the National Park Service at that time, if you can believe it...
What the hell is VMI? Virginia Military Institute. Founded in 1839, Virginia was part of the South. West Virginia broke off from Virginia to become part of the North. So it was created right when slavery was like about to be abolished, right when it was, you know, tensions were ramping up or whatever. I'm not sure what like context there is here, but okay. So basically he had a Confederate flag in the background. Go on.
Let kids do. It wasn't considered controversial when I was 13. They use that as like, you know, an optical thing of like, look how scary this is. This kid reenacted in a Confederate situation. And so people are, I think, very programmed, at least some people, to look at that symbol or any symbol or uniform or...
Oh, I see. Yeah, the VMI uniform looks exactly like a Confederate uniform. I looked it up. Here. You see, I know that it's some Virginia Military Institute thing, but did he even live in Virginia? Did he go to Virginia, like, Institute? What are his connections to this? Why did he wear this, and why did he wear it while standing in front of a Confederate flag? It seems pretty obvious to me what he's doing.
Really anything associated with the Confederacy and freak out and think this is the most horrible thing. This is like Nazis. And it's just...
Yeah, sure. I'll agree to that.
That's not the case at all. And so I've stood my ground on this. I have ancestors who fought for the Confederacy. None of them owned slaves.
Knock me over with a feather.
They were poor. They got invaded. Their churches and so forth were burned. And so they defended themselves. And I stand up for them. I stand up for what I think is righteousness and truth, acknowledging that neither side is perfect in any...
Oh, my God. He's both sidesing us right now with the Confederacy. Bro, the Confederacy was an enemy nation, okay? They were enemies. You're not... like, there is no excuse for what the Confederacy did. But even worse, the excuse they're using is slavery.
Struggle, and that certainly goes for the South as well, and that certainly goes for the institution of slavery, by the way, which I don't think that they were primarily trying to defend in the war. But
really,
I think even the fact that their society featured this labor relationship, that doesn't mean that the society...
It was a labor relationship, he says. Their society featured a labor relationship of slavery. Oh my God, dude.
That their society featured this labor relationship, that doesn't mean that the society was intrinsically fundamentally bad. And
yes, it does.
On this level of Holocaust, which is basically...
Yes, it does mean that.
Basically what the post-war consensus basically made the Holocaust the worst thing ever, and now we're roping in all these other things. Slavery is just another Holocaust that happened in the United States.
Sure, yeah, okay. I'll take that. It was bad, and I'm just like blown away that he's justifying this. Sorry, I'm trying to fix my the cropping on my thing. Anyway, there's no excuse for this, honestly. It's just wild.
MAGA anti-immigration is now apparently another Holocaust, and so
he's trying to be hyperbolic here, but no, nobody said any of that. However, there are absolutely things that are, up there that are real bad and disgusting and horrific and wrong. And he's sitting here justifying it. My God, dude. Aurelius, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. Hi, Owen. Been watching your channel for a while now. Keep on calling out BS, brother. Will do, buckaroo. That is something that I can do.
So it's like this moral play that they keep doing. And I just don't want to let him do it. So
talk to us a little bit about where do you...
It's a moral play the left keeps doing, denouncing slavery. My God. This coming from people who are constantly talking about the morality of being gay or whatever and how it's so wrong. I mean, that should tell you exactly where their heads are at, right? Like, I don't think that most people are racist. The vast majority of people are not racist, at least not consciously racist, not knowingly. I think nearly everybody perpetuates racist, outcomes. They do things that hurt minority groups regularly. I mean, me included, without even realizing. But I don't think 90% of the country is intentionally, knowingly racist. These guys are part of that 10% that are. And they're like, when one of those people who's actually doing racist things but doesn't even realize that it's racist, when they're called out for being racist, they feel like offended by it, And this guy who's genuinely, legitimately racist is playing off of that anger.
That they keep doing. And I just don't want to let them do it. So
talk to us a little bit about where do you see the error, if you see any at all, with the abolitionists, and then kind of a question tied into that. If not slavery, what was the Civil War about? And certainly, I mean, it was about slavery, but what also was the Civil
I'm surprised that he admitted that. The right's trying to erase that.
War about?
Sure. Okay, so abolitionists first. This is actually very relevant because a lot of pro-life or anti-abortion groups want to tie in their movement with abolitionism on some level by making a moral comparison between abortion today and slavery.
I've literally never heard that argument before in my entire life. What the hell is he talking about?
And I've argued that this is really what Karen Swallow Prior does. This is what Russell Moore does, where they try to take other issues that aren't directly murder and then make them pro-life. And so you shouldn't be surprised if anti-smoking or pro-BLM...
Wait a minute. Is he saying the right tries to tie themselves to abolitionism? Is that... I thought he was saying that the left is comparing this to slavery or whatever. Is he saying that abortion is equally as bad as slavery because that's effectively what you're doing and they are the new abolitionists or whatever? I've never heard that from the right, but that doesn't surprise me. That kind of tracks. And he's upset that the right is framing themselves as abolitionists, I guess. Holy shit, man.
Make them pro-life. And so you shouldn't be surprised if anti-smoking or pro-BLM or pro-environmental, anti-greenhouse gases becomes a pro-life issue, because you're already doing it once you make that moral comparison. So this is directly relevant for that reason. But we have...
Okay, I don't know what any of that other stuff was about, but he's saying the logical extension of abolition, of no longer wanting to enslave people, the natural extension to that is people being able to be equal citizens in society and not have second-class citizens. BLM. Wow, man. I'm sorry, is that too loud? Let me turn my stuff down a little bit. I don't want to blow out people's eardrums or anything. It went yellow for a second.
Moral comparison. So this is directly relevant for that reason. But we have to make a distinction before I think we arrive at abolitionism, because the abolitionists, the name can be somewhat confusing if you are not a student of history. They were a specific group located in the North who were pretty much radical. In fact, I'd rather use the word radical abolitionists or immediate abolitionists to describe them, because
the word radical obviously has negative connotations to it. It seems like that's why he's using the word here, right?
What distinguished them wasn't so much that they were against slavery. You had a number of gradual emancipationists who were also against slavery. What distinguished them was they wanted an immediate end to slavery because they believed the slave-master relationship was intrinsically a sin.
Okay, yeah, sure. Whatever gets you there. I don't care if it's a sin. I don't care if the Bible endorsed it. It's irrelevant to me. But if that's what you need to tell yourself to end slavery, then great, fine. I feel like you can justify anything with the Bible, literally anything. But just looking at it in the cold light of day, I'm trying to think, does the Bible endorse slavery? There was slavery at the time. I don't think Jesus, condemned slavery, right? He even referenced it. I mean, not positively or negatively or whatever, but it was referenced. I think Paul might have referenced slavery positively. And then, of course, there's the Old Testament. But I don't really put much stock in the Old Testament because it's irrelevant for Christianity today, largely. I guess you could say that the Bible is kind of pro-slavery. Yeah, sure.
And of itself.
I'm sorry, let me rephrase. The New Testament is pro-slavery.
They believed the slave-master relationship was intrinsically a sin in and of itself. So there was no way that someone like Robert E. Lee, who inherited his slaves and thought that Christian civilization would eventually get rid of slavery, but he couldn't.
He inherited them. See, he didn't purchase them, so he wasn't really participating in the system. Are you serious with this? You know that they could have, like, just freed the slaves anytime they wanted, right? They could just say, hey, I don't think that owning a human being is right, so I'm putting an end to it, and it's all, it's on you now. Have fun and do your thing. But no, Robert E. Lee didn't do that. He continued to perpetuate this whole thing by continuing to own slaves. My God.
Afford to free them, and they wouldn't be in a good circumstance if he did try to do that. Someone like him
they wouldn't be in a good circumstance if he tried to free them. You catch that? Dude is saying slaves are better off as slaves. They're doing better working for me for free. Holy Christ.
And they wouldn't be in a good circumstance if he did try to do that. Someone like him is in sin, and there was varying degrees of what they wanted to do about that. The most extreme cases, I suppose, being John Brown and the Secret Six who financed him, wanting to start slave insurrections and kill white people in the South and form even perhaps a slaveocracy, not a slaveocracy, but
what?
An empire or a region that slaves controlled, former slaves.
Okay, you're going to find out in a minute, but he just straight up lies in this, like falsifies information. Like there isn't even a grain of truth to it. Like I'm not sure if it was earlier or later on in the video. He says the Confederate, Constitution outright banned slavery, but the North didn't have. The Union Constitution did not outlaw slavery, so the Confederates were really the good guys in this scenario. So I look into it, and lo and behold, it's false, completely false. There's no grain of truth to that at all. As a matter of fact, the South's Constitution explicitly said states are barred from outlawing slavery. So the point I'm trying to get to here is do not trust a word out of the dude's mouth. Not one word. He lies like he breathes.
Slaves. And these kinds of things obviously scared the South in many ways. And there was a postal crisis in the 1830s where millions of...
Like, this is what I'm talking about. Don't trust a single word out of his mouth, even this. A postal crisis, it seems trivial. You shouldn't even trust that this thing happened without looking it up directly, because he just straight up lies. Actually, Angel Hair is an animated web series. One of the characters, Angel Gabby, is a reference to Gabriel, one of the angels. The series may be a bit of analog horror, but reminiscent of every animated Christian cartoon. Interesting. Okay, we'll write that down. Angel Hair. All right, I'll write that down and I'll take a look.
Pamphlets from abolitionists went down south, and some of them encouraged this kind of thing, to start an uprising. Don't work for your masters. Disobey.
All right, look, I'm going to give you guys a hot take now. I am a complete pacifist. I do not believe in war, practically at all, almost never. So incredibly rare. However, I do believe that fighting slave owners is a good cause. I would encourage that. Yeah, I would stand for that. Absolutely. So you're saying that these pamphlets were like encouraging slaves to like fight back and try to gain their freedom that way? Fantastic. Dude's framing it like it's a bad thing.
Really the Bible on these points. Kill your masters. And
you know what? I think I'm in favor of that in this specific case. Again, pacifist here.
And there's some actual minor insurrections that happened that were influenced by this kind of thinking. And so that scared the South. But these were the abolitionists the Southerners didn't like. And so if you look at the preceding the Civil War during the federal period, so up through like up till 1840 almost, you had way more anti-slavery institutions or organizations in the South and in the North. And by the time
See what I'm saying?
the war happens, you have none. And that's because the radical abolitionists start upping their rhetoric and vilifying the South in horrible ways. William Lloyd.
Are you kidding me? Okay, so what was the South doing through all of this? They were just twiddling their thumbs? Were they like out there freeing the slaves or something? What's his claim here exactly? Vampira Mayhem's art world for weird kids. Thank you for the super chat. Hey, from Scotland, writing a horror comedy movie about these creeps, and your channel's been a really good resource. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Sounds interesting. Send me a link when you finish it. Maybe we'll take a look at that.
Garrison's one of the big ones who does this. But you also have Harriet Beecher Stowe and Reverend Ward Beecher and Albert Barnes and George Cheever. And there's all.
Is he saying that Harriet Beecher Stowe and stuff, those people were in favor of the South? No, they weren't.
All these guys who want to really vilify in inaccurate ways and portray the South as a horrible, horrible place.
Maybe he was saying Harriet Beecher Stowe was vilifying the South.
That's where there's just a lot of abuse going on, and that's what colors the whole entire thing. And so there was a resentment produced by that, and so they fomented, I would say, and
good. Foment as hard as you possibly can to free human beings from slavery. I'm all for it.
Really careened us closer to a war. In fact, Abraham Lincoln later on said that Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, he referred to her as the little lady who started the big war, because she had no experience with slavery in the South. She had never been down South, but she writes this novel, and this becomes a bestseller, and it portrays the South as this horrible, horrible place.
It was. They owned human beings. I could be wrong on this, so don't quote me, but I believe that at its height, 2/3 of the country owned slaves. Like 2/3 of households had a slave that would like cook for them or be their maid or whatever, or just like work a job for free, of course, because that's what slavery is. You're getting free labor from somebody who doesn't have a choice. It blows my mind that we're sitting here listening to a dude justify slavery. It's not even like he's justifying the South's role in this. He is justifying slavery. All right, let me see. There's something I want to pull up here. Yeah, take a look at this. Slave advertisement newspaper. I saw this recently, and I wanted to show you guys. Here we go. This is the one I was looking at. Great Sale of Slaves, January 10th, 1855. $3, aged from 20 to 26, strong, able-bodied. One wench, Sally, aged 42, excellent cook. Wow, they gave her a name in this. Surprising. One wench, Lies, aged 23, with 6-month-old pickaninny. I don't know what that word is, but I really hope that I didn't say something super racist. Oh my God. $1, age 52, good kennel man. 17 bucks, age from 12 to 20. Excellent. That's insane. Okay, I want everybody to like recognize what this dude is doing right now. What he's justifying in the name of like the Bible, in the name of God. This is nuts.
And so So the abolitionists, I would say, were somewhat irresponsible. They wanted to end it, but they didn't have a plan for compensating masters who had...
Oh, dude, I love it. This is so funny. This is another example of him just straight up lying. Abolitionists didn't have a plan for compensating masters. Really? That's false. The masters, quote unquote, had no right to compensation in my mind. But you know what the government did, actually? They purchased the slaves from the slave owners. Seriously. So the people in the South, the slave owners, got compensated. The slaves did not. Everything out of this guy's mouth is a lie and subject to scrutiny. Literally everything. Like, don't trust a single word from him.
Really, you know, ultimately, if you want to trace the supply chain back, they had received their slaves. They had bought their slaves from northeastern merchants primarily. They didn't get compensation. There was no integration into society. The constitutions and laws in many northern states prohibited black people from certain civil rights. They couldn't even, in some places, live in those regions.
I don't know what he's talking about, but sure. Yeah, things were... Black people were second-class citizens at the time. Yeah, absolutely. Is he... What point is he trying to make? He's saying that it was bad in the North and ignoring the fact that it was even worse in the South? Like, what?
They had to contain it in the South, and they didn't want them in the Western territories. So the South is supposed to free all these slaves who aren't necessarily all ready to take care of themselves, and they're supposed to just bear the cost of this. And the South said, no, that's not a good deal. And so that's, I think that's on a broad level what people have to understand about this. It's not that those in the South who were fighting for the Confederacy that's fighting for the perpetuation of slavery or
No, that's what they were doing. They were perpetuating slavery. They were fighting to perpetuate it. I am not going to let him get away with this.
Slavery in the abstract. Most of them, I would say, were gradual emancipationists of some...
Well, I would say that you're dead wrong. Like, what expertise does this guy even have to be speaking about this? None. He's pretending to be some kind of an authority. And you know what? If you're going to pretend to be an authority, you're going to have to give me some kind of evidence of that. You're going to have to, if you're not an authority, you got to give me some sources. And if you are, give me reason to believe it.
Stripe. They wanted to get rid of the institution. And there's some proof I can go through if you want to know.
Oh, great proof. Yes, fantastic. Lay it on me.
More about that. But
would you be surprised to know that he never lays the proof down for everybody to see? He's completely full of it.
They just weren't radical abolitionists that saw a one-size-fits-all solution to immediately abolish without compensation and integration. So
one size fits all. You have to free your slaves, and that's just what it is. One size. Yeah. Black and white issue. And that's just wrong in his mind. It was too black and white. People shouldn't all have to free their slaves. Oh my God, dude. And the absolutely insane part of this is that Joel Webbon, Pastor Joel Webbon, is sitting here listening to this, agreeing with this, going, yeah, that sounds good, absolutely. That's insane.
Oh, that's on the abolitionist front. I'm trying to remember, what was the other question you asked?
Well, no, you kind of you answered, I think, both. The other question was just, what was the Civil War, if not over, simply abolishing slavery? What was the incentive? Like, why?
Yeah, the Civil War is simple, actually, in my mind. It's complex if you want to get into all the causes that led to...
No, not complex. Pretty straightforward. The South wanted to own slaves, and the North said you can't. It was a rebellion against the government. You can come up with all these ridiculous justifications and claims and whatever else all you want, but ultimately it's because the South the South wanted to own slaves. Plain and simple.
Separation of the states and so forth. But the war itself, if we're just talking about the war, it was a response to an invasion. So you have deep southern states seceding, and one of the issues, the tariff was an issue, but one of the issues also was slavery in the Western territories and being prohibited from taking slaves into the Western territories. And in context, you have to understand this isn't really about the extension of slavery, because it doesn't change the number of slaves. It's just where.
So is he in favor of slavery or not? Because he keeps pretending that slavery was a bad thing. But when it's convenient, but otherwise claims that it's a good thing.
They're located. It's really about keeping Southern elites from gaining any control in these new states. So if they can't travel to those states and live in those states and bring their slaves with them,
Okay, so you're telling me it was slavery. It was about slavery. Again, don't believe a word out of his mouth, okay? Even if it, makes logical sense, look it up yourself. Every single word.
Under the Kansas-Nebraska Act, there was supposed to be popular sovereignty, so you would have states decide for themselves whether they were going to be a slave or a free state. Well, Republican Party wanted to make it so you couldn't even bring slaves into these states, and that was, they thought, a violation of the Constitution and a violation of their influence, and this would make it so that the North and their industrial economy would be the preeminent force and not them, and they saw that the agrarian society was doomed because of this. So that was definitely part of the reasons for separation, not the only thing, but it was part of it. But
he's speaking like an authority here.
Really, the war itself wasn't that, because think about it this way. The lower South could have left. South Carolina, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, they could have left the country, and there would have been no bloodshed. And
what does he mean by that? They could leave the country? Are you saying, the people that lived in those states could have just up and left the United States? Are you serious right now? What if they had a bunch of stuff here? What if their family was here? You can't up and leave. This is so stupid. I hear Ben Shapiro say this too. Well, climate change is going to hit Florida and people are just going to have to sell their houses. That is one of the stupidest things I have ever heard in my life.
What happened, though, was Lincoln made a call to arms. And that's when you start seeing the upper South, like Virginia, and upper southern states, North Carolina, decide, you know what, we don't want to live in a country where you're just invaded.
Okay, wow, interesting. I'm pretty sure I know what this is, but let me just look it up. Hang on. Yeah, okay, as I thought. At 4:30 a.m. on April 12th, 1861, Confederate troops fired on Fort Sumter in South Carolina's Charleston Harbor. Less than 34 hours later, Union forces surrendered. Traditionally, this event's been used to mark the beginning of the Civil War. So, who fired first again? Is he just lying, once again?
When you start seeing the upper South, like Virginia, and upper southern states, North Carolina, decide, you know what, we don't want to live in a country where you're just invaded. Because at the time, secession was, by many, considered to be a constitutional right.
No, it was never a constitutional right. They just assumed that they could secede. It doesn't say you can secede anywhere in the Constitution, right? Did it ever?
And we can get into that if you want. There's many reasons for, and legitimate reasons people thought that. But they wanted to respond to Lincoln's force. So you don't see anything about slavery, for example, in Virginia's secession declaration. It's really just a response to Lincoln has called up arms. We're going to join the people who have left because we don't want to live in a country like that.
This is just complete bullshit. From beginning to end, all of it. It's just a lie.
So the war itself was about whether or not a state has the right to secede. And you can go into the background and you can look at these other causes that cause division, even Northern liberalism, Northern higher criticism, Unitarianism, all these things do factor in. There's cultural clashes going on even before slavery, or I should say abolitionism really becomes an issue. But ultimately the wars comes down to we're going to defend ourselves against an invasion.
Going back to something you said previously,
What an absolutely wild take on the Civil War. The South was just defending themselves from invasion. Oh my God.
Who were selling slaves? You said Eastern merchants. Who were they?
Northeast.
Oh boy, more lies. Ready?
Yeah, well, so the main, this goes back to really the founding. And the Puritan society was, a lot of it was based upon, they were seafaring people, right? So they did a lot of trade, not just the slave trade, but that was certainly part of it. And so it was peoples from that region who were going to the Ivory Coast and in what's called the triangle trade and selling rum and other things, molasses, and then getting slaves. And then they would come to South America, but mostly places like the Caribbean, and then, of course, the southern United States as well. And they would sell their slaves at ports like Charleston, but they'd also come to New York and come to Providence, Rhode Island, and slaves would be shipped down the Mississippi River. And so those who were making money the most off of this would have been that class of merchants. And this was a huge thing that, like Robert Louis Dabney talks about. They all talk about this, really. Jefferson Davis talked about this. But Dabney has a line in the Defense of Virginia in the South where he essentially says, like, the sons of New England didn't really have a problem with this when it's them. But when it comes to their political enemies, us, they want to vilify us for this. And so there was a lot of resentment over that.
Oh my God, dude. They want to vilify them for their political position, which is apparently Bible-based too, in their mind, of owning human beings. Holy shit. Is this where it starts again? No. Hold on. Let's jump forward. Stupid sponsorships. Oh my God. Okay, here we go.
Another question. One of the, the arguments that abolitionists at the time would make, and then, and still is, referenced today, is, that the entire, slave trade, the Bible doesn't outright condemn slavery, but the slave trade that occurred in America, the transatlantic slave trade, was condemned outright by Scripture because Scripture condemns man-stealing, kidnapping.
Right.
Interesting argument. Okay. Again, I think I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, but I feel like the Bible doesn't condemn slavery, the New Testament even. Like, it openly advocates for it in the Old Testament, describes how you should be doing it and stuff, and who you should be enslaving. But the New Testament, I've settled on, it's not opposed to it, and it's not like endorsed by it, not heavily anyway.
I've read a little bit of Dabney on that, because it's not like he was ignorant, and he wasn't deceptive and pretending that he fully acknowledged where slaves were coming from and how this was being perpetuated, but he had a defense. He makes biblical arguments for why not just slavery that's mentioned with Israel holding slaves, but even the slavery that was going on in America. He would not have had slaves if he thought that it was against the Scripture. He was a Christian man, so he had a way of justifying it. Whether he was right or wrong is that's up to the listener to determine. But he did have a scriptural argument for why.
My God, dude! I mean, this guy's very clearly advocating for it, right?
Even slavery in America that was based on race, that it still actually met the Bible's standards. Can you get in? What would you say? Just
holy Christ!
Someone who says, well, slavery in America, it was exclusively black people, and all these black people were stolen, and so therefore, not one single person in the South, while claiming to be a Christian, had a leg to stand on.
So this guy is asking him to justify slavery outright now.
In terms of a biblical defense, how would you respond to that claim?
Yeah, a few things. So number one, this may seem minor, and I think I accept the general premise here that you're mainly sourcing the slaves from the Ivory Coast because the slave markets were already set up there.
Again, I don't know. I don't feel like looking it up. Do not trust a word out of his mouth.
And that's where there's tribal warfare going on, and it's Africans who are selling Africans into slavery to Europeans and also to Muslims. So these markets were already there.
So is he saying that like white people were just completely like their hands were entirely clean on this issue? They were just purchasing them? Are you serious right now? I believe that there were some slave traders in Africa, to my knowledge. But like those people are not here now. And they weren't in the United States perpetuating it and continuing to own them and sell them. Like, holy shit.
It wasn't that the Europeans went and formed them.
And you know what? One more thing. Slave trade bad. See how simple that is? I denounce that. It was bad for, like, you know, African people to trade slaves if they did. And it was bad for white people to trade slaves. See how that works? He's like looking for a gotcha here.
Which is an important point probably to bring up. But it wasn't strictly based on race. If you think about it this way, and I know people are going to bring in all the justifications some did use. In the North, by the way, also to justify not just slavery, but segregation and these kinds of things, that there is a racial hierarchy. You can find these kinds of quotes, but I would say that it's more based upon location in a way, like it's geography. This is just where there were workers that you could.
Dude, are you kidding me right now? It wasn't race based? You telling me that you believe that slavery in the United States was based on where people lived?
It's capitalism in a way. They're cheaper. You can easily obtain them right on the coast there. And so that's why it was so easy for them to ship them over. But you did have white slaves. And oftentimes...
Okay. I shouldn't even be conceding this, but let's say hypothetically maybe that's true. There were white slaves. How many? What was the percentage? What was the population compared to the black slave population? It was almost non-existent, right? He keeps bringing up these like exceptions and implying that they're rules. Just lightly implying it, like saying there were white slaves and implying that it was rampant, like there were white slaves all over the place. Is he going to like claim that white people were persecuted because they were slaves or something?
We refer to them as indentured servants. In fact, those who came over from Africa on the Dutch ship in 16...
Well, indentured servitude is effectively slavery, but that's not, I don't know, they're different a little bit. One of them you eventually get freed, I believe. Or you have the option of being freed, I don't remember.
19, the black ones even were probably indentured servants most likely. But they were treated off...
Yeah, but they were slaves. So you had to work for somebody for free. You were giving them your labor for free for an undetermined amount of time or at all. That's slavery.
Oftentimes horribly, even if they were white. And I remember there's an antebellum house in Lynchburg when I lived there, and on their record and on their rolls, they have listed some white slaves. And so there were some, and there were...
Yeah, I don't believe him, but okay.
Many, there was...
Like I said earlier, he just like made things up. He just lied, straight up lied. The Confederacy took the first shot at Fort Sumter. I guess we haven't gotten to this part yet, but what was the other thing he said? Oh my God, I said, the Confederate Constitution did not say you can't own slaves. He's just lying. Were there any white slaves? I don't know. I doubt it, honestly.
They have listed some white slaves. And so there were some, and there were many, there was thousands of black people. Well, yeah, I think I'm not off base saying thousands. So there are at least hundreds of black slave owners as well. So who participated in this, who got out of slavery or...
Wow. Okay. So not only were there white slaves, but there were black slave owners. Are you shitting me right now? Oh my God.
Bought their freedom. There were sometimes mechanisms for them to do this. And then they became slave owners, and sometimes very successful large slave owners. So it's a little more nuanced than that to say it's just...
No, it's not. White people in America owned slaves that were predominantly black, and I think some Native Americans also. That there's no like nuance here. They owned human beings.
Strictly based on race. But there is a book by Eugene Genovese, I think it's called A Consuming Fire, where he talks about Southern Christian preachers specifically and how they grappled with some of the things that did not quite meet a biblical standard in Southern slavery. So you could think of anti-literacy laws, which were really to prevent slaves from reading abolitionist literature that would maybe inspire them to kill and cause an insurrection.
He's justifying it right now. He's justifying anti-literacy laws for black people. This is insane. Hang on, there's a famous test, actually. One second, let me find it. Yeah, here it is. Wow, it is I have a clip collection, owenmorgan.com/clips if you want access. It's free. I'm not selling you anything. I don't want them to be lost to time, but in my clip collection, I have some like documents also. One of them is this this literacy test from Louisiana that was given to slaves, I believe, to determine if they can be freed or if they can, I don't remember what the conditions were. Literacy test. This test is to be given to anyone who cannot prove a 5th grade education. Do what you're told to do in each statement. Nothing more, nothing less. Be careful, as one wrong answer denotes failure of the test. Let me blow it up. 1. Draw a line around the number or letter of this sentence. What? What the hell does that mean? Draw a line around the number or letter of the sentence. You mean circle? I mean, and what letter or number? Which one? There are like 50 here. Number 2, draw a line under the last word in this line. 3, cross out the longest word in this line. Okay, those are less complicated. Draw a line around the shortest word in this line. Do they mean circle it? Again, like one wrong answer means you fail. You have 10 minutes to complete the test. One wrong answer. Circle the first letter of the alphabet in this line. Okay. Does he mean the C in circle, or does he mean the first instance of the word or the letter A, which would be right here in alphabet, I guess. Number 6, in the space below, draw 3 circles, one inside or engulfed by the other. Okay. Number 7, above the letter X, make a small cross. What letter X? Right here? Do they expect people not to know what a cross is? Draw a line through the letter below that comes earliest in the alphabet. Draw a line through the 2 letters below that come last in the alphabet. The 2 letters that come last? So it'd be Y and Z, I guess. In the first circle below, write the last letter of the first word beginning with L. In the first circle, write the last letter of the first word beginning with L. What word that begins with L? What does this mean? Number 11, cross out the number necessary when making the number below 1 million. Okay. 12, draw a line from circle 2 to circle 5 that'll pass below circle 2 and above circle 4. What? All right, draw a line from 2 to 5 that passes below 2 and above 4. Okay. In the line below, cross out each number that is more than 20 but less than 30. Okay, so between 21 and 29 then, right? You're supposed to cross out each one. There are 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there are 3 of them. Some people may be tempted to cross out the 20 though, because it's within like the range, the set or whatever, and that would be a failure. Anyway, The point is, this is the type of literacy test they used to give people. Oh, wow. This is actually a really long literacy test. Oh, my God. We'll call the literacy test there, but it was just like dirty and wrong and brazenly and blatantly evil.
They didn't want them to read that, so they had anti-literacy laws, right? They were neglected. They were, very famously, Stonewall Jackson taught slaves to read the Bible anyway, and it was just something that they didn't really enforce. But they were on the book.
Well, see, that's the thing. You don't have to enforce anything. You have to literally do nothing if you want to keep slaves illiterate or anybody illiterate. You have to actively teach them, put time and money into an education. So people just didn't bother. My God, dude.
It was just something that they didn't really enforce, but they were on the books in many southern states. You also had the fact that the slave trade itself, I think Dabney calls it an iniquitous traffic, and there was even if maybe the northeastern merchants or whoever, European merchants who were bringing slaves over, they weren't maybe doing the kidnapping, but they were relying on tribal peoples in those regions to.
So he's saying that no white people from the South kidnapped slaves, so there was no biblical rule broken. If the person had already been kidnapped and they're handed over to you, then you're not breaking any biblical rules. That's called following the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law, my friends.
Kidnap, or maybe it was just the result of tribal warfare. It's a little hard to say, but certainly, the beginning of the supply chain wasn't a good thing at all. And so you're stuck with this situation where if you lived in that society, you're inheriting this. It's not something that you're going out and with the force of the government you're causing to happen. You're not saying, let's go get some slaves. I think a lot of people with modern state assumptions think that's how it worked, that the state could have come in at any time and just ended it. But it was not like that at the time. It was very organic, and there wasn't a central authority capable of stopping it. There wasn't even state authorities at the time really capable of stopping it when it started. So when we do have a authority that is capable of stopping it, you do have in the Constitutional Convention, they said this is going to be phased out, and by 1808 we won't have any more of it. You do have in the Constitution of the Confederacy, because by 1808 there were still people smuggling in slaves. The Confederate Constitution outlaws the slave trade. A lot of people don't know that, but
no, it doesn't. That's a complete lie. It explicitly banned states from. Oh my God, just trying to find my words here. It explicitly banned states from outlawing slavery. It is so wild to me that this dude with a straight face can just lie to you. Just lie.
It does, and it allows states to free their slaves at any time they want to.
It literally does not. It explicitly did the opposite.
Free them. So there's no sanctioning of slavery perpetually in that particular document. You have at the end of the war, Jefferson Davis provides a mechanism. It was too late, but there's a mechanism for slaves if they join the Confederacy to eventually gain their freedom. So they had the moral capability and will to eventually get rid of this. But it was a complex situation. I think as Thomas Jefferson.
It's not complex. You shouldn't own a human being. Super simple. And it was a systemic thing, like where it was being enforced by the governments of the United States or just the state governments or whatever. So they should be responsible for like not just compensating the slave owners as they did. In fact, they shouldn't even compensate slave owners. They should just say, you're free now. Go off and do your thing. And they should be compensating the slaves themselves. At the time, like in 1860, whatever, they should have given the slaves, I don't know, the equivalent of like $30,000 each in today's money and a plot of land. They should have done that, at least, in my opinion. Bare minimum. I don't know that the U.S. government would have been capable of like handling anything more than that. If they could have even handled that, I don't know. But that seems like a necessity, a bare necessity. If people need to go hungry in the United States to make that a reality, then that's what it is, in my opinion. Like, these people just benefited so much from other people's free labor. It's horrific. I can't even believe this dude's defending it.
Said he wanted to diffuse slaves in the Western territories, and he thought that's where they would gain independence. They wouldn't suffer from some of the racial abuse, or I should say,
Oh, he said abuse. He doesn't want that, right? It wasn't abuse in his mind, so he wants to clarify so everybody knows that slaves weren't actually being abused, right?
From some of the racial abuse, or I should say, being a different people, living among others who don't share everything in common. They could go out to an area where they could claim it as their own and build their own society. But that's what the Republican Party wanted to prevent. So they were kind of like bottled up in the South.
And when you
Republicans at the time were the far-right party, all the way into like the 1950s, if anyone is unfamiliar with the time period or whatever. The Democrats were on the right. The Republicans were on the left. That's what I meant to say. The Ku Klux Klan has always voted Democrat. They're called Dixiecrats. All the way until, like, the party switch in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, basically, under Nixon and stuff. So, a lot of far-right people like to twist this fact around and make it seem as though Republicans are the good guys today, when in fact they are the party of slave owners. It's just like they've kind of changed is all.
You say the Republican Party, that is...
Yeah, the Republican Party, when the Republican Party started, that was one of their main planks. If you look at...
But just for our listeners who may not be aware, that's the North. That's Lincoln.
That's Lincoln. Lincoln's...
Right, so is he in favor of slavery or against it? He keeps switching.
Republican Party was all about internal improvements. He's basically a Whig, like Henry Clay, who believed in the American system, which means railroads and government expenditures for infrastructure projects.
Wow, that kind of sounds like the left, huh?
And the Midwest sided with the North, even though they were more culturally with the South because of this. They wanted that. The South didn't want that. They were for smaller government, and they didn't want the tariff that funded these kinds of things because it hurt them and forced them to buy from manufacturers in the North. So there's a lot of...
That's so fascinating. So right now he says the North, the people that you tend to value and think are like the good guys in this scenario, the North were really the Republicans, so you should respect Republicans. And then he starts to like talk positively about the South. I mean, you're seeing this, right? He's flipping back and forth, back and forth. Whatever is most convenient to him in any moment is the one he espouses.
Economic things going on. But one of the things that was a main plank of the Republican Party, if you look at their state conventions, you look at early Republican leaders and quotations by them, they are very adamant that the Western territories, which are going to become states eventually, should be for free white labor, meaning we only want white people in these areas. We do not want black people there. And
okay, well, I don't believe in segregation. See how that works?
That was one of their reasons for excluding slavery. They didn't want to be around black people. And so this is one of the things that doesn't fit the modern narrative, but it's just true. I mean,
again, don't trust a word out of his mouth, okay? He lies like he breathes. Now, let me just step back and listen one more time to that.
The Western territories, which are going to become states eventually, should be for free white labor, meaning we only want white people in these areas. We do not want black people.
So the Western states, he's claiming, were not part of the North, really, or they were only part of the North because they didn't want black people in their neighborhoods, I guess. They were for segregation. Well, again, I don't trust a word out of his mouth, but even by his own narrative here, it sounds like they were for the North, right?
People there. And that was one of their reasons for excluding slavery. They didn't want to be around black people. And so this is one of the things that doesn't fit the modern narrative, but it's just true. I mean,
What doesn't fit the modern narrative? I don't understand how that doesn't fit the modern narrative. And what's the narrative? That human beings were owned by other human beings?
So that creates a situation where it makes it harder to free slaves, because where are they going to go? And you have to deal with the realities at the time. They didn't fare well in the North. In fact, there's a debate between two Presbyterians, J. Blanchard and Reverend N.L. Rice, in 1845, and they're debating gradual emancipation, Southern perspective versus basically the immediate abolition position.
Human beings just shouldn't be owned. I can't believe that this is the debate that a pastor is having.
And that's one of the things that comes up. And Reverend N.L. Rice, who's taking the gradual emancipation position, says, in denying that slaveholding is in itself sinful, I do not defend slavery as an institution that ought to be perpetuated. I desire to see every slave free, not nominally free, as are the colored people in Ohio. And so he's slamming them and saying, you guys are calling for free the slaves. You don't have any of them living near you. And the few black people that do live in your states, you discriminate against very heavily. And I don't want to see them in that situation either. So putting them in the West, allowing them to go out.
Oh my God, dude. So you're telling me that you believe that slavery is preferable to, being a misfit in society, or being a second-class citizen? That is absolutely nuts. Jesus Christ, dude. Anyway, I got to get off here, but I'll tell you what, let me know what you think about it in the comments. And if you want to see more of this kind of thing, Owen Morgan Unfiltered, 10:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. I'll be talking about Project 2025's, what do you call them? Training videos. Also, check out my book, owenmorgan.com. It's about Jehovah's Witnesses. And check out my Patreon. Anyway. All right, I'm going to get out of here. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me. It's been fun. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow morning. If not, I'll see you next week.